It's incredibly hard. You can't talk about how you feel when you're in the throes of a dark and deep depression. But we're learning. We're learning as we go through because people are talking and we're listening. And I think in a decade from now, we're going to be in an even better place.
I'm Ria Andriani, writer and musician from Sydney. In this series, I'm going to talk to musicians with disability about how they're changing perception through their involvement. Damon Smith is an award-winning composer, lyricist, music producer, filmmaker, and performer. In 2021, Damon debuted his film Mental is Everything, which has been screened at the Melbourne Documentary Film Festival. It is based on a cabaret show he and his co-collaborator Adam Code created. Damon, how has your mental illness affect or impact your life as a musician?
With having bipolar disorder, you experience extreme highs and extreme lows. There's not really a place in the middle, unless the medication is really working, but that's another story, trying to get that right. So I find that if I'm experiencing mania, I will come out into my space here, or wherever I lived in my life, where I had a setup or some guitars and a piano and whatnot, and I would create. But it's given me a really great way to understand the work that I'm doing and I guess the quality of it, because sometimes when you're experiencing mania, you think that you're working on something that's an absolute stroke of genius and you know, I'll be vocal while I'm doing it. This is unbelievable, my goodness, it's 3 a.m. or something. And then you sign off and you finish that piece of work and wake up the next morning and listen to it, and it's absolutely dreadful. But then if I'm feeling more low, if I can find my way to a piano, some really beautiful things come out. So I think it has certainly helped me. It's helped me have, give me a particular drive, grit, and a dedication that I may not have if I didn't experience this mental illness.
That's really interesting that you find music as a trigger, but also a solace with your mental illness.
Having the music has been a hugely cathartic and incredible thing. I cannot imagine what I would do without the ability to do it and to have the support of someone like my wife. There's two very important parts that help me, components that help me continue going forward, really.
In the Mental is Everything film, you talked about your OCD and how you have to put on your socks a certain number of times and it has to be mathematically perfect. I noticed there was something quite mathematical in terms of pattern when you're improvising.
So if I tap 3 times here now, that feels pretty good. However, I just tapped with 3 fingers, right? So mathematically, right, I've done it 9 times because I have 3 fingers. So I then think, oh, I have to do it one more, which is tapping 4 times. But now I've reached 12, which 12 is one of my numbers, 3, 7, and 12. So that's confusing, I know, but that's what I go through every day. It's making sure that all my fingers, you know, it's an even number thing in some way to get to 12. And if I muck that up, I have to do something else. So in music, it's really unusual. I've composed pieces of music that are entirely mathematical. And not that I'm good at maths, it just comes down to having to do it like this because something bad will happen to myself or my family or the world if I don't do it. It's been great and it's been positive, but it was getting to a point where it was just ridiculously annoying. And now I'm better at approaching that. So I find now getting on a piano these days is beautiful because I just tend to just forget about it.
That's really interesting that, you know, like 3, 7, and 12, the musical language does accommodate that. That's really neat.
I think talking about mental health is a really incredibly important thing to do, and we're seeing that with people. We're seeing more and more people stand up and say how they feel, and it's incredibly hard. You can't talk about how you feel when you're in the throes of a dark and deep depression. So there's different ways to sort of approach that as a person wanting to support that person in that place. But we're learning as we go through, because people are talking and we're listening, and I think in a decade from now we're going to be in an even better place.
A lot of the times talking about mental illness is like admitting a vulnerability, and what ideally we'd like to have is a world that doesn't judge us, right?
Oh my goodness, that is so true. And that vulnerability, I find it really hard to be around some people, because some people they think being vulnerable is a weakness. And, you can't do anything unless you're vulnerable. You have to make mistakes. And when you've got people that understand that around you, goodness me, you can trailblaze at that point.